Hi folks, welcome back to Dice Tavern, your cozy little corner here on the YouTube. Today we're digging right into Daggerheart and discussing the design flows with the armor system, how it works, the problem, and solutions how to fix it. So let's jump right back in. So quick recap. In Daggerheart, armor has essentially two functions. First, the damage threshold system. The heavier your armor is, the higher your threshold is for getting major and severe damage. But we're going to focus on the second one, which is that armor also gives you armor slots. Player can choose to spend one armor slot per incoming attack to reduce the damage by one threshold level. Essentially what it means is that you can say that you use one armor slot to negate 1 HP damage. But here's the problem. There is no decision making anywhere. There is no choice to be had. Let me explain. The thing is, except in some situation, which I'm gonna talk about real soon, I promise you, there is no reason not to mark an armor slot when you get hit. Armor slots essentially work as a bonus HP, but only if you're using them. If you die with armor slots left, that's like dying with unused healing potions in your pocket. And since you can only use one armor slot per attack, you can't have them saved up for later to save you from death from a big hit. You have to use them as soon as possible, or risk losing the benefit all entirely. Still not with me? Let's look at one example. In this example, the bard has 6 HP and 3 armor slots and are fighting some goblins. In this first scenario, he's gonna try to save up armor slots to be used for later. So the first incoming attack of course hits and causes major damage, which is 2 HP loss. Since he will not use any armor slots and save them for later, it marks 2 HP and now have 4 HP left. Second attack is a minor damage. The player is still not marked any armor slots, so we'll have 3 HP left. The third attack is severe damage, ouch! And the bard must spend an armor slot to survive, which leaves the bard to have 1 HP left. Fourth attack causes 2 HP damage. Even though bard has 2 armor slots left to use, it doesn't matter, since she can only use 1 armor slot to absorb 1 damage. And she has only 1 HP left, so either way will get damaged and be forced to make a death move. That poor little bard. So let's take a look at the same scenario if we used armor slot every single turn. The first attack was major damage. The player uses 1 armor slot, 5 HP left. Second attack was minor. Player uses 1 armor slot, 5 HP left. Third attack is severe. Player uses 1 armor slot, 3 HP left. The fourth attack is a major damage. And since the player has no armor slot left, which means is forced to take the whole damage, but will still have 1 HP left. The bard survived the fourth attack and will have a 4th round to do any actions or perhaps change the situation for the better. So hopefully you see the problem that I'm pointing at. So let's talk about it. Because there is not a good reason not to use your armor slot, the system creates the illusion of choice. What I mean is there is no choice at all. If you have armor slots when you get damage, you have to use them right away. There is no drama in the decision. Unlike Daggerheart's other systems like hope, stress or fear, the resources you have provided to you, you will always ask yourself, should I use it now or should I save it for something else later? With armor, it is always yes, use it, which flattens the tension, which makes it boring. But if you have read the core rule books and are sort of familiar with the Daggerheart, you're probably gonna jump across the screen, type in the comments and say, Tommy, there is situations where saving armor are beneficial to you. And I agree. There are some situations that are beneficial, so let's talk about them. Stalwart Guardians have the ability Iron Will that gives them power to mark an additional armor slots per hit. Suddenly, we have a real choice here. Use one armor slot, use both, save it for later, or use now. Then we have the few abilities like Grace Touch that use armor slots instead of stress. So you might want to use armor slot to use it as a resource for your other abilities. Also, few abilities like Eclipse will end its effect if you take severe damage, so saving armor slots for those moments are crucial. We can also see that the new classes that are in the playtest, currently in the playtest, have this restriction as well, so you want to save armor slots to prevent you from losing your abilities. And there are of course some enemies like the green ooze that will force you to mark an armor slot, and if you can't, be forced to take an extra damage, which makes it a compelling reason to save on those armor slots. And you could make the argument that it is easier to heal HP rather than armor slots through healing abilities and consumables. But that only works as long as you're not close to death, for remember, you can only use one armor slot per incoming attack, so if it's overwhelming, it will not save you. These points are just there for argument's sakes. They are very situational or circumstances. They are not a general rule. So in general, as in general rule, you will always use armor slots when it's available to you, which makes armor slots just not interesting. So if you agree with me, then what can you do about it? What kind of house rule can you introduce and make the armor slots more interesting? Here's my suggestions. First suggestion is a good practice in general. When you use a GM move, introduce more choices in your game that requires player to use armor slots. For example, when a trap is triggered, and if they fail with hope, ask them if they want to use an armor slot to ignore marking HP damage. When the PC falls down a cliff, they can mark an armor slot to reduce the damage of the fall. This makes armor a more flexible resource and forces the player to think about armor not just inside combat but also outside. Another suggestion is to introduce a house rule that the player can spend up to 2 armor slots per incoming attack instead of 1. That gives players more choice and depth without creating, what I think at least, too much imbalance. But if that is a bit overpowered, here's my third suggestion. Introduce a cost. Marking 1 armor slot is free, but they can mark a second armor slot for a price. For example, they can mark a second armor slot by giving GM a fear point, mark a stress, or apply disadvantage on their next attack. This symbolizes that their characters are in a desperate situation and start to take desperate measures for their own survival. Suggestion 4 is a simple house rule for a more gritty world, and that is if a character is suffering severe damage, they also gain a lingering wound. What a lingering wound is, I will let you figuring out, but what that means is that the player will have to choose to take a small hit now or save armor slots to prevent a lingering wound later on. Hopefully these small tweaks will reintroduce that missing tension and some meaningful choices back into the armor slot system again. What do you think about Daggerheart's armor system? It's too generous, or it's too streamlined, or just exactly what narrative play needs? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have any house rule suggestion, I would love to hear them. See you in the next video. Bye.